So thank you, Council, for letting me speak a little bit on the 2018 annual report. We got behind a little bit in records this year between the state and us, and so we just got it out to you last month. There were some questions and concerns about some of the crime rates and statistics you've seen in there. I can address some of those today and give you some thoughts on that. But before I do that, I wanted to throw a couple of highlights out there that were in this too. This year we were able to, without any funding from, advanced funding I should say, from the council or otherwise, sponsored another Reserve Academy. As we know, 3 years ago we did a Reserve Academy. We hired 6 out of the 7 reserves that are now full-time officers with us. This academy resulted in 4 new reserve police officers with us, and we partnered with Thurston County and Yelm in that. As of January of 19, we also have 3 full-time school resource officers, which is pretty unheard of in a town this big to be able to have 3 full-time school resource officers dedicated to the schools. Our teams last year handled over 13,000 calls for service. This is over 3,000 calls for service more than we've handled in 15, 16, or 17. Those were 10,000 a year plus. Last year was 13 plus. We did this with the same amount of staff we've had since I've been here. While we received less 911 calls, and you can see that in the report over the year, the call volume resulted in approximately 700 more police reports and 400 more arrest reports generated through records. Speaking of records, our records team, and Donna can attest to what bear these are, our records team also responded to over 1,900 public records requests last year. 1,900 public records requests came through just the police department. Due to retirements and unfilled positions, we hired 5 police officers in 2018. And in today's world, that's a pretty big deal because hiring is becoming its own chore. To have 5 people, one from a neighboring agency that had 12 to 15 years experience that decided to walk out the doors and come to us was a great accomplishment. With that in mind, our average tenure with Shelton Police Department is about 5 years. Out of our 19 officers, I've hired 11. So that tells you that they got less experience or less time here than I do, which is less than 5 years. So about the crime part of it, almost 5 years ago when I got here, I began speaking to any service club that would listen, community organizations, every group I could go to about the importance of calling the police department. I would constantly hear in my conversations, there's really nothing you can do about it. It was just a bicycle in my front yard. It was just a lawnmower out of my garage. I didn't want to bother you guys are busy. And I drilled into this community, call. Because if you don't call, we don't know what's happening in your community. And then I hear about it later, about, well, you know, I've had several things stolen out of my yard, or I've had this happen to my car, but we don't know about it. And we can't address those issues. So that part of the crime increase in the calls for service, you're welcome to blame on me. Because I think that just goes to show you with 3,000 more calls for service that people are calling. They're paying attention. And that's a good thing. That's not a bad thing. I think some of these crimes were occurring and we didn't know it. The other part of that is that, well, I was reminded by one of the community groups that I spoke at recently of that very statement just a couple months ago, that you already told us this was going to happen. But there's other things that would go on with this. This is just one piece of the crime rate. Obviously, there's no magic answer to this. As a nation, we haven't figured out an answer to this, so I can't figure it out at this level. But I tell you, the other pieces that I see in this community are poverty, narcotics, mental health, and of course, our jail crisis. And as you read the report, I did get on a soapbox in one page of an editorial of what that jail crisis has shown for the city of Shelton. Just some real quick numbers to throw out to you there. We compare 3 years with our annual reports, 2016, 17, and 18. And some of those, suspicious activities is one of those in particular. That's when somebody just calls and says, we have a suspicious person on our street or suspicious vehicle on our street. Those increased by over 500 calls for service alone last year. And that's what I was talking about just calling us. Those can result, and often do times result, in some kind of contact with an individual or people and may result in arrests later. Our traffic stats went up quite a bit as well. It's interesting because people don't lump traffic in with criminal. There are criminal traffic offenses that occur. Driving with your license suspended, hit and run, those type all fall under crimes. Well, last year, the criminal traffic citations were almost doubled from what they were the previous year. Our officers wrote about 300 more citations in the last year than they had in previous years. And some of those fall under criminal as well. In addition, what we talked about with the jail crisis, and I'll read it real quick, just a portion of it, to give an easy perspective. In 2018, Shelton officers contacted people that had warrants through Mason County or other jurisdictions 594 times. In that 594 times, these people were not accepted for booking by Mason County Jail. That's 594 times that people could not resolve their case or put it into their warrant, and officers could not arrest that person. And that's just the ones we're counting. So if you, and I know you don't have it with you tonight, but I'm going to show you the page I'm talking about. It talks about drug enforcement, and I talked about that being a big piece of this. At the top of the drug enforcement, you will see adults arrested for, and then it gives you drug paraphernalia, heroin, marijuana, amphetamines, methamphetamines, prescription fraud. Those are your arrest stats. Underneath that, it says pending adult and juvenile investigations charges. And what that means, and that's even a more alarming stat than the arrest, because that is charges that could not be booked into the jail, but we had to release them on a citation or a promise to appear and are pending with the prosecuting attorney now. These are possession charges of all of those narcotics or sales of those narcotics. So that's how that is interpreted through there. And I can give you an idea that last year, or in 2018, our narcotics enforcement stepped up incredibly. And a lot of that due to the young men and women that we've hired that are eager to be police officers and go out and save the world. I mean, that's what they got hired for, to go out and do those things. And they're doing them. They're just having to get creative in how they end up enforcing it and arresting. And there are some concerns that people will see in there that the assaults have gone up, aggravated assault or assaults. And they have. There's no doubt. However, we also make sure we put into our reports our pie chart that shows the relationship to the offender. And what that tells us is there are a very, very small minority of those assaults occurring that are a stranger. In other words, a relationship with that victim, which tells me we have domestic violence issues, which tells me we have people putting themselves in places, in bad places at bad times with bad people. So again, I'd reiterate, overall, we're a relatively safe place to be. We have a property crime issue, we have a drug issue, and it's driven by a lot of those different things. And I'd be happy to answer any questions that come with it.
Questions for the chief?
I would just appreciate, I was here when you were hired, and I just believe that you have done a phenomenal job for the city of Shelton. It's an honor and a privilege to call you a friend and a co-worker, and the challenges that your department and you face every day is beyond what we encounter. And so thank you for being here. Keep up the good work. I don't care what those statistics say. I'm glad you're here.
I love being here. I'm going to stay here as long as Jeff will have me. As frustrating as it is for all of us to see these things with the jail issues, imagine what it's like for that line level person. They're seeing this on a daily basis going out there and not being able to do something about it. So that's where it really frustrates me.
It is frustrating.
Thank you.
How's the dog, by the way?
The dog will graduate the 21st of this month, as well as the handler, and we'll have him here.
So we having a party?
I'm sorry?
Graduation party?
We may.
Milk bones, just milk bones for everybody.
And we still have T-shirts and hoodies on sale for anybody who wants them to raise money for the equipment for the second.
Don't tell my wife that.
Those sweatshirts and T-shirts, when you wear them, they really generate a conversation. So they're cool to have.
Anything else, Jeff?
That's all I have.